USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number, 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number, save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Last night, you spent 2 hours deciding what to wear to the party. This morning, it'll take you 2 minutes to list it on Depop and make your money back. Just grab your phone, snap a few photos, and we'll take care of the rest. The sheer dress and platform heels you'll never wear again? There's a birthday girl searching for them right now. Your one and done look is about to pay for your next night out. Or at least the ride home. Your style can make you cash. Start selling on Depop, where taste recognizes taste.
Welcome to Away the Podcast. It's Martin here, and we've got a very special edition of the pod today because we are talking all about legends. And as you'll have no doubt heard, Sunderland announced plans for Legends Way outside the ground as part of a whole host of initiatives, including the Welcome to Sunderland signage from Roker Park being installed and a new statue of Jimmy Montgomery. Now, as part of this project, Legends Way will consist of 14 names from Sunderland's history being acknowledged, and the club have given us 43 names to select from. So we thought we'd have a go at selecting those 14 names and whittling down that list from 43 all the way down to 14. So to help me do that, I've got our Sunderland history experts with us today. So first of all, Kelvin, this is a brilliant initiative from the club, isn't it? Something that we've talked about on the pods, certainly on the On This Week pods, continually through the course of this year, isn't it? The club doing more to acknowledge former players and former achievements. And Kelvin, it's a great initiative as part of a bigger, fantastically good thing the club are doing.
Fantastic. I thought I can remember when we were talking about Jimmy Thorpe sticks in my mind. I think it was the three of us, and both on mic and off mic, behind the mic, we were talking about an initiative like this and getting something done for players, that we would think were legends, and honouring them in some way that we probably felt hadn't yet been done. I'm giving a hint about where I'm going today, but and I remember that. I remember the discussion about Jimmy Thorpe in particular, and I would love to think that somebody'd been listening to us. Do you think we curry that amount of favour at the? I don't know. But yes, cracking. Totally agree with the initiative. Once again, the club, whoever's idea that was, whoever's pushed that forward, well done to them. Great initiative, but behind every good idea, there's a lot of you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. Jesus, what a debate to be had about who should be on that walkway. Brilliant.
Also with us is Andrew, and Andrew, it is great to see this being acknowledged, isn't it? Because all of this sort of stuff, it's the fabric of the club, isn't it? And there's some fantastically good people and players, managers, all that sort of stuff who deserve to be acknowledged in some way, shape, or form. And this is part of that, isn't it? Hopefully it doesn't stop here. This is part of an ongoing thing to acknowledge people and recognise the contribution that they made to the football club. But it's massively important, isn't it?
True, very true. It is important. I love this type of thing, and football fans can be quite demanding of players, and yet so many people on this list have have achieved great things and are spoken about in such high regard down the line, that service does it. It needs to be recognised, and it just adds something to the stadium. It gives the stadium a real feel of identity, and this is Sunderland, this is who we are, and if you turn up here and do the business, one day we'll chant your name or we'll recognise you, and like Kelvin said, it's an interesting conversation, and I thought, I've not fallen out with anybody for a while. I've not had an argument, so let's get stuck into this, because it's you're always going to have your own personal favourites and your own ideas about who classes as what.
You certainly are. So as I said at the top of the show, the club have given a list of 43 names for us to select from. So I'm going to read through those names quickly first, and then we'll have a talk about that collection of players and people to start with. Okay. So this is in alphabetical order. This is in no order of preference. So James Allen, the founder of Sunderland AFC, is on there. Gordon Armstrong, obviously midfielder, famously scored the goal against Chelsea in the FA Cup. Len Ashurst, long-serving fullback and, of course, manager in the 80s. John Owld, a defender of the 1890s, part of the team of all talents, won 3 league titles. Steph Bannon, who was a stalwart for the Sunderland ladies team, captained the side for many years. Gary Bennett, of course, captain, pioneer, now commentator, done all sorts of great work on the field as well as off the field. Kevin Ball, former captain of Sunderland, obviously through the 90s. Charlie Buchan, somebody who we've talked about extensively on This Week podcast. Absolute giant pre-war, 222 goals for the club. Somebody who is synonymous with those days of football. Johnny Campbell, brilliant striker in the Victorian era for Sunderland. And again, Johnny Campbell, somebody who we mention almost every week on This Week pods in terms of goal scoring. Rach Carter lifted the league title and the FA Cup in consecutive seasons in 1936 and 1937. Johnny Crossan, brilliant Irish playmaker in the mid-60s. Ted Doig, the legendary goalkeeper from the team of all talents. Bobby Gurney, who got 228 goals in 388 games, won the FA Cup in 37 as well as the First Division in 36. Ron Guthrie, the left-back from the 73 FA Cup winning side. Dave Halliday, another person who we mention every week pretty much on This Week podcast, a fantastically good goal scorer. Vic Hallam, the 73 FA Cup winning striker. Steph Houghton, who was the England captain as well as starting her career at Sunderland. Mickey Horswell, who played in the midfield in the 73 Cup final, of course. Billy Hughes, one of Mickey Horswell's teammates in 1973. Charlie Hurley, the player of the century, as voted for in 1979. Seth Irwin, the right back in the 60s. Bobby Kerr, obviously the captain of Sunderland for the 73 Cup final. Dick Malone, FA Cup winner as well. Jamie Miller, a member of the team of all talents who won 4 league titles with the club. Johnny Mapson, of course, a legendary goalkeeper, who won the league and the FA Cup with us. Bob Murray, former chairman of Sunderland, masterminded the Stadium of Light and the move to the Academy of Light. Kevin Phillips, brilliant goal scorer, of course, in the late 90s for us. His partnership with Niall Quinn was superb. Richie Pitt, centre-half for the 73 team. Ian Porterfield, of course, the man who scored the goal in 73. Niall Quinn, Kevin Phillips' strike partner, brilliant player on the field, chairman, airport, saviour, everything you can imagine. Gary Rowell, obviously the local lad, scored a hat-trick against Newcastle, famously at St James's Park, and an all-round hero at Sunderland. Len Shackleton, the Clown Prince of Soccer, 348 games, 101 goals. Jill Scott from Sunderland, played for Sunderland women, obviously then went on to play for England, and very proud ambassador still for the club and a pioneer really on Wearside for women's football. Tommy Sorensen, of course, famously saved the penalty from Alan Shearer in the derby. Jimmy Thorpe, who Kelvin mentioned earlier, brilliant goalkeeper in the mid-30s, obviously tragically died after the injuries sustained in that match against Chelsea at Roke Park. Colin Todd, who came through the academy, and won England caps. Dennis Chewett, member of the 73 team, as was Dave Watson, who, as everybody who listens to the podcast regularly will know, a big favourite of Kelvin's. Willie Watson, who played an awful lot of games for Sunderland, also represented England at international level for cricket, and David Young, who was also a member of the squad in 1973. Now, Andrew, that's a comprehensive list. There's a few talking points within that list, I think, to start with. But to kick us off, is there anybody from your perspective that should be on that list that isn't?
There's a couple of names, yeah. Excellent rundown there, by the way, Martin, because that was a canny old slog having to go through all those names, and and there'll be people on there who maybe younger fans don't know too much about. So it's nice to think that as part of this conversation and this vote, fans are going to learn about some of the previous names. But yeah, none of these names I'm saying would necessarily be guaranteed to be part of the 14, but I'm surprised the likes of Brian Clough and Eddie Burbanks were not part of the conversation, at least. And I think, had I been asked as an 8-year-old, I think I would have demanded that, like, all 14 stones just said Marco Gabbiadini. I mean, I've spoken about him loads. And again, if it was me, I think they would all pay homage to, like, the 90s and Tony Norman, Martin Smith, Dickie Ord, all these personal favourites of mine. but yeah, Clough, Burbanks. I mean, Burbanks scored in an FA Cup final for us. I think he scored he was the first person to score in a cup final for us, and that was the team that won the FA Cup for the first time in our history. But it's tricky when you've got such a list of achievements. You're bound to have players who sadly miss the cut.
No, you are absolutely. I think it's a tricky choice, isn't it? Do you even get a long list? Never mind a short list. There's a couple that stand out. There's two main talking points that stand out for me. Actually, maybe three. So one is the inclusion of Bob Murray on that list. Now, everybody else is a player. Now, unless the club have made a mistake and should be Bill Murray, which there is a possibility, isn't there? If you're going to have Bob Murray on there, then you need managers on there. You need Tom Watson. You need Johnny Cochran. You need Peter Reid potentially on there if you're going to include people who aren't players. So I think that's a really strange inclusion, I have to say. You've got the Murray Gates as well. Jimmy Montgomery's not on that list, and the rationale for that is he's going to get a statue. So if Bob Murray's already got the Gates, why is Bob Murray included on this list? It seems to me it seems like a political thing rather than something else. That's one thing. I don't know if either of you want to argue vehemently for Bob Murray's inclusion on the list of Sunderland legends.
No, I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. If that is Bob Murray, then start with Tom Watson and work your way forward for a list of managers, and you'll probably end up with 4 or 5 others who arguably should be on that list.
I have to admit that much as I've got huge respect for Murray's achievements, I had to admit that to me that did stand out a little. And I can't remember, forgive me, one of you suggested that hopefully this is just the start of the club recognising various figures. I have to admit, as part of my narrowing down, I've kind of fudged it, and I've created my own little separate subcategory of individuals who maybe deserve something different.
Yeah.
Maybe for special impact or long service. I think managers, we could easily just have a display purely for managers. And Bob Murray is one of those. He does already have the Gates, which might negate that, but yeah, I think some of these people are so important. Gary Bennett, for example. Gary Bennett has done so many amazing things on the pitch. I think he's played at Wembley a few times. He's He's had such an impact in terms of culture and community. I think that there's a case to be said that other people deserve something separate to this. And hey, who knows? We might be having this conversation next year when the club announce phase 2. I don't know.
Well, that's right. And Kelvin, the other thing, or one of the other things that stood out to me with this was that all of the 1973 team were in. Only a few of the 37 team were in, which is obviously the team to first win the FA Cup. And look, you can argue which was the bigger achievement. Of course, we know the giant killing that went on in 73. As Andrew's talked about, there's people who played in 37 and the league titles that haven't got onto this list. Is the 73 team overrepresented in this list, do you think?
Well, I think, of course, you're dancing on my nerves there, Martin, a little bit. I haven't lived through that. And it's quite hard to put that away or not be over by what you saw yourself. And when I set myself away looking at this, I was very conscious of, I'm an unashamed fan of Dave Watson, for instance. And if you've heard me talk about Ian Porterfield, but it isn't just the 1973. What I tried to do was think about the players that I guess did more than one thing. So the players, for instance, Bobby Kerr, the 1973 FA Cup final, him being captain, he was a great part of that team, but he was a great part of another team as well that got with promotion. So that's kind of what I looked at. I was looking for more than just one thing, and certainly very conscious of players from the team of all talents, players from the 1913, the 1912-13 era, and then again the 35, 36, 37 crew as well. I felt they deserved a bit of research and a bit of fair representation within there, and that there were players that pushed themselves forward as I was looking at that. Just going back to the omissions, I was surprised that Brian Clough wasn't on that list. I was surprised about that, and also that Lalty Wilson, wasn't on that list from the team of all talents. I know John Auld was, but Lalty Wilson was captain and played through 3 of those early league championships. So there were dilemmas like that. You could go through just about every success. Those 3 periods of success that were had. You could look at them in a bit of detail and start adding more players to your list, because then you think Ned Doig, Johnny Mapson, these players all start sort of coming into your thinking,
Right.
So, not an easy task really. And 14 to pick out 14 players is I don't know why that is. There'll be some practical reason for that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a strange number to land on, isn't it?
Yeah. I suppose it's it's a squad from, I'm trying to think when that would be your match day squad, the 90s would it be? It just seemed an odd number to me.
Yeah, it is.
But there we go. Not an easy task.
Right, we're going to come back to Brian Clough because it taps into a point I want to talk about before we get started. The other thing that stood out to me with this, Andrew, and I know you're a keen watcher of the Lassers team. Now, is it fair to include Lassers players in this? Should there be a separate? We talked about doing separate things for teams. Should there be a separate thing for Lassers team? And this is the men's team stuff. Is it good to put them all in together? Because you've got people like yourself who will go and watch both teams regularly, and you've got enough knowledge about both teams. I must admit, I know of the names on the list from the women's team, but I've never watched a women's game for Sunderland. So I'm not familiar with I couldn't tell you who deserves to be on, who shouldn't be on. So my feeling, I'll probably a slightly controversial one, is that they should have a thing for the men's team, and they should also have a thing for the women's team at the same time, where the people who go and watch the women's team, go and watch the lasses, have a vote for who they think should be represented in a separate way. Obviously, they decided to put everybody in together for this. Is that something that sits well with you, or do you think there's another way of doing this?
I think it did sit well with me. Yes, maybe the women could have perhaps, like you say, been part of my fudge list, my get out of jail list, and featured on their own separate recognition. But we are called Sunderland Association Football Club, so we're a club and we have teams at different levels. Our women's team has continually succeeded in terms particularly of developing players, and was one of the teams that at the start of the revolution in women's football in more recent years was at the forefront. I think it's important, it's really important that we recognise the fact that Sunderland have always enjoyed a particularly high amount of female support. Sunderland is really embedded in the community and represents so many different types of fan. I mean, even back in the days of the boys' enclosure when Kelvin was going, he'll admit that he would get distracted because there'd be plenty of girls in there as well supporting the team. I mean, he's staying stony face there and not committing anything. But there was, in the early years of the stadium, I like gents, and I would not be surprised if this was still the case. But Sunderland had Sunderland had the highest percentage of female supporters in the country. Even now, before our most recent game, the club released a video, I don't know if either of you saw it, where there was a young kid and a 93-year-old female Sunderland fan who'd been through thick and thin. Her passion for the club was evident in every word she uttered. And I just think, they need to be recognised in some way. And for me, of those three, I would say there's one falls into my definites, one falls into my maybes, and one falls into my not for me type of list. Which, by the way, that is horrible. Every time I put somebody in the no list, it's not me saying I don't think they did a great job or that they couldn't very easily lay claim to being a favourite or a hero or a legend in their own right. It's just that for this particular process, they might not make the bill. And just a couple of very quick points to follow on from previously, if I may. When this was first announced, this path was referred to as the Wembley path. Now, more recent mention of it by the club seems to have quietly dropped that. But I wonder if that's why there was such a heavy lean towards the 73 team in their thinking. And another thing, you spoke about why only 14 stones. There's an aerial mock-up of how this area will look available on the website. And it only goes partially along the Roker end. It's going to go in between the Montgomery statue and the Stokoe statue, which I believe is going to be rotated, which is a nice little thought, so that he's running towards Montgomery. I don't know if the other space is then going to be used for something down the line, or dare I say it, might be impacted by potential extensions down the line. Who knows? Who knows?
I wondered about that. My mind started playing with what else could they do, and I did wonder about could there be something that some kind of trail from Old Roker Park to the Stadium of Light that has sort of, when we're thinking about, what Andrew had a phrase for it earlier. I cannot remember what he called it, but something else.
Yeah.
The get out of jail project, if you want, would be so a trail from Roker Park to the Stadium of Light was one of the things that I was thinking. But I was maybe stealing an idea from something that's already there in these the blue
plaques,
the blue plaque kind of thing in all the pubs that people used to drink in, which is a cracking little idea. I do like that one. I will do that one day. So there was that. I felt there was something there in that. The ladies, coming back to your point about the ladies, and it is quite I have been to see, I have watched ladies' games, but not a lot of ladies' games. And I do feel, I sort of feel like I'm not really, myself, I feel I'm not qualified to sort of debate and vote on. I wouldn't be an informed kind of choice. And I also wondered in terms of the Jill Scott as a character. She's a great character, isn't she? And she's a real sort of. She's got a really nice way of bigging up Sunderland that I like. She's a Sunderland lass and bigs up the city every chance she gets, and I love that about her. And it's one of the reasons if I see her on the telly, I'll just sit there watching it, just waiting on some kind of Sunderland reference in one way, shape or form, not just her accent, And I think that's brilliant, but does that make her a legend in the sense of, do you know where I'm sort of going there?
Well, this gives us a really nice segue into the next bit of the conversation. So you've got Jill Scott as an example there. You've got Brian Clough as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what constitutes a legend for us in this conversation in terms of who should be awarded one of the 14 places that are on the ground here? And I think as some of the other space, just to go back to your point, Andrew, I know the club is selling spots. As well as you can buy spots, so maybe that's what's going in around us.
Yeah. When I said extension, what I meant was extension of the Roker end itself.
Yeah, I know. But in terms of the space around it, I wonder if that's where those bits are going to go.
Yes.
But in terms of what makes a legend, so how are we thinking about this? How have you both thought about this? So what we've done over the past couple of days is we've put our lists together in terms of the people who we think are definites for one of the 14 spots, people who we think are maybes, people who we think, thank you, but no thank you, you've missed out on this occasion. Let's do something else that gets us out of jail for not selecting you. How have you thought about what constitutes a legend? So, use Brian Clough as an example, right? If Brian Clough had just retired after his injury and nobody ever heard of him again, would we think of him the same way in terms of this project? Andrew, you and I were talking about names that we thought should have been on or could have been on. Clough was one of the ones that sprang to mind. On reflection, now was if he just retired and dissipated from football after injury against Bury, we probably wouldn't think of that. It was his achievements after Sunderland that would maybe put him into legend status for this project. Is it longevity of service? Is it specific achievements? Is it being part of a squad that has achieved something? David Young's on the list, the substitute at Wembley. So Kelvin, how have you thought about what actually makes up a legend for the purposes of this discussion?
So more than I've tried to focus on more than just one achievement or thing, and that achievement or thing has to be done with Sunderland. because we've had people like Brian Clough's a great example, Martin, of somebody who went on and forged a career. If for the vast majority of people in the country, if you said, tell us something about Brian Clough, they wouldn't talk about his goal scoring record at Sunderland and Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
They'd talk about him as a manager. And it's a great story. It's a great history that he built. It's fantastic. You start reading stuff about Clough and talk about disappearing down the rabbit hole. It's a bloody warren with Brian Clough. There's people that have disappeared down there and they've had to send them out and rescue after them. It's a fantastic story. But is it Sunderland's? Is it Sunderland's story? Has he actually been a legend at Sunderland? Is one of the, as he strutted his stuff with us, he's got a remarkable scoring record. But for that injury, it's almost like you want a sliding door panel, don't you? Because there's an argument for Ian Porterfield there that but for that injury, what might have happened? What would he have gone on to do with the club, And it's painful stuff that when you start, especially when you've seen those players play, it's almost painful, when you think what might have happened there, we're talking about Jimmy Thorpe before there, we know that the international selectors were looking at Jimmy Thorpe all them years ago, he was on their radar and he could have been an international player. He didn't get that on his CV, and you just feel, God, I wish he'd been around long enough to do that. So more than one thing was what I looked at, and doing it with and for Sunderland. Some kind of, I guess I'm looking for commitment to my club here. What have they done? What's been their commitment? What's been their mark on my club? How have they helped the club move forward? So that's what I was looking for.
Nice.
And I guess that would be part of my reasoning with Jill Scott. She did lots of really good things, and she's done lots of really good things. She's great. She's a great TV personality, I think. She's brilliant. And there's an argument there to say she's still doing stuff for Sunderland. She is. Every time you watch her, there's some little reference or even just her accent. I think, go on, lass, keep speaking away there. So there's a little argument to be had there about that if you take my if you take my reasoning.
Absolutely.
For what makes a legend, yeah.
So, Andrew, how about you? Any slightly different thoughts on how you've approached this one?
No, you listed a few traits earlier, and I think it was a little bit of all of those different things. By the way, Kelvin, you're not fooling anybody. You're just trying to excuse the reason why you watch I'm a Celebrity by bigging up Jill Scott all the time. He was on that a couple of series ago, I believe. And again, did I agree with you? Every time she speaks, she represents Sunderland brilliantly. And also she's a regular visitor back home. I think she's still got family living in the Fulwell area. But yeah, for me, it was a little bit of everything, and there's no hard or fast rule on this, but the 14 for me, kind of all I think you could say had a sustained level of performance on the pitch over a certain period of time. I think, just quickly flicking through my list, I think virtually all of them you could say that about them. Kelvin as well. I love that idea of somehow incorporating something between Roker and the stadium. That was a lovely idea. That might be an idea for another day. It's not something the club have ever mentioned before. But it reminded me, the stadium's quite close to our old Newcastle Road ground, where some of these players from the Team of All Talents era played. So again, we're going to end up decorating half of North Sunderland here, linking all the various ground. But there was, when the Stadium of Light metro station was being agreed and the extension of the metro was all in the planning, there was always an intention to some way link the stadium to the Stadium of Light Metro Centre. There was originally going to be there was talks about like some sort of red and white pathway, to help people who were unfamiliar get from the station to the stadium. Is that an idea that one day gets resurrected? We've got so many worthy individuals that, there's another thing. The club thought they'd done a good thing by coming up with this idea, and now we're sending them away with 3 or 4 extra jobs on the to-do list.
Kind of worms once you start getting into it, isn't it?
My fit of pique when Brian Clough wasn't on the list was, I'm going to buy him a brick right behind the goal, and that's where all the goal scorers should go, There'd be a former protest group that bought bricks. Of course, none of these new bricks are going to be behind the goal, are they? Are they going to be behind the Roca goal? I haven't looked at that. But stick all the goal scorers behind the goal and all the midfield players and defenders, place them geographically placed around the stadium for the positions that they played. And I was going to form that protest group that bought these bricks, you see. And anyway, I'm giving away my secret plans there.
I was going to buy Danny Dickey one for the bottom of the weir. We will take a very short break at that point, and we'll be back after a couple of ads to go through our definite list. We'll see you soon.
K-pop Demon Hunters Haja Boys breakfast meal and Huntrix meal have just dropped at McDonald's. They're calling this a battle for the fans. What do you say to that, Rumi?
It's not a battle. So glad the Saja Boys could take breakfast and give our meal the rest of the day.
It is an honor to share.
No, it's our honor.
It is our larger honor.
No, really. Stop.
You can really feel the respect in this battle. Pick a meal to pick a side.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's while supplies last.
Welcome back to How Are the podcast for a very special edition of Sunderland Legends. And we are talking about the 14 players, or personnel rather, who we believe deserve to be acknowledged as part of the 14 bits of, I think there'll be bricks, won't there, on the ground forming the walkway between Bob Soko and Jimmy Montgomery. Now, in the last couple of days, both myself, Kelvin and Andrew have gone through the list and picked our definites. So what we thought was that if all of us agree on names that should definitely be acknowledged and rewarded here, we would just include them as part of our list without a great deal of conversation. So we've got 7 that we agreed upon. Those are Charlie Buchan, Johnny Campbell, Rach Carter, Bobby Gurney, Bobby Kerr, Ian Porterfield, and Niall Quinn. So there's 7 names there who are all fantastic names in Sunderland history, Kelvin. 1973, you got Bobby Kerr there, and obviously, as he said, he contributed more than just the FA Cup run and Wembley win. He was part of the club for an awfully long time. Porterfield obviously got the goal and was a big player for us over those years in the 70s and stuff. You got Rach Carter and Bobby Gurney from the 37 team. Got Charlie Buchan and Johnny Campbell from the earlier days. And of course, we've got Niall Quinn as a modern inclusion. Happy with that list so far? 7 big names, 7 stalwarts of Sunderland, and I think they all tick the criteria of the things that we talked about earlier.
Very happy and a good spread, isn't there, of eras and a good spread of the successes that the club has had. So I thought that was not a bad start by us.
Not a bad start at all. So the other names that either one or two of us had as definite, but not all three, are interesting. Myself and Andrew had Charlie Hurley, Sunderland's player of the century, Kelvin. You've decided King Charlie isn't worthy, or not automatically worthy, of being included. So come on.
I wish the listeners could see you rubbing your hands and drooling at the mouth. As anybody that's listened to me on this week will know that Charlie Hurley is, I was blessed to see him play, and blessed to see that lad in our shirt, and he's just a fantastic player from our history. But I do feel like, this was by the time I'd got my list and realised what a big job we had on our hands, I did feel like, well, we've honoured this lad. Charlie has had a number of honours and accolades made by the club, and he's got these in the Hall of Fame as a for instance. He was named Player of the Century in 1979. The Sunderland Training Centre was named after him. So that it seems to me like there has been good recognition of the role that Charlie Hurley played. If there was more space to get him in there, he would definitely, because although I didn't have him in my list of definites, I did have him pretty high up my list of maybes. I was conflicted about Charlie, but the reason why he wasn't a definite was based more on the accolades that are made and placed by the club upon his head. He's had a number of crowns placed on his head over the years, Charlie, and deserved every single one of them.
So that's Charlie Hurley covered off. Andrew, Kelvin and I both had Jimmy Thorpe on our list, and he was one who you put him in your get out of jail free, give him a statue or something list, didn't you? So is there any more of a rationale for that?
Yeah, I just think Jimmy Thorpe lost his life playing for Sunderland in effect, which is that's a hell of a thing to say about somebody. And maybe I'm being over sentimental with that, I don't know, but yeah, I just feel as if there's a case to say that he deserves his own little tip of the hat. And I know you two are not saying that he doesn't deserve that. I'm the one who's broken the rules by introducing my little list of technicalities and grey areas. Charlie Hurley there, Kelvin makes a good point. The spread of the eras is really important because Charlie Hurley was famously voted Player of the Century, but I did hear I've heard a lot of people over the years say, well, there was a bit of recency bias with that because the vote only took place a few years after he'd stopped playing, whereas there was lads and names from the 30s, for example, that could have had the vote taken place in a different period of time, they would have been voted Player of the Season, Player of the Century. So to have that spread is really, it recognises the whole history of the club. And I don't know if you know, gents, I don't know if you've spotted, I've sent you a photo there of one of the plans for Legends for the layout. Montgomery's, the positioning of his statue probably does line up with where the goal is at the Roker end, give or take. So when Kelvin said he would have his little strikers union dotted around that part. I wouldn't put it past the club to have gone into such detail that the design and the reason, the length of this path is so that Montgomery is positioned roughly where the goal is. You know?
No, you wouldn't be surprised, would you? So I think what we're saying is Jimmy Thorpe actually deserves a statue or some other thing because the significance of his time at Sunderland is so immense that he deserves more than what this is. That I certainly would be in agreement with that.
And also in agreement would be any local artists who might get the commission to do all these these extra jobs I'm farming out.
Right, so the other names that got one mention on a definite list for one of the three of us, I had Gary Rowell on my list. Kelvin, you had George Hurley on yours. Andrew, you had Jamie Miller, Kevin Phillips, and Jill Scott is definites on your list too, didn't you?
Jamie Miller is one of only 2 players to win 4 league titles with Sunderland, which puts him for me in the category of sustained success, you know. Kevin Phillips, I mean, we're all going to have very valid arguments for all of these names, but Kevin Phillips became a world-famous name scoring goals for Sunderland. I think, isn't he the only Englishman to have won the European shoe? So, you know, that's a pretty big statement. And forgive me, who was the third name?
Jill Scott.
Yeah. Well, we've spoken about Jill earlier. I just think that she's a wonderful inspiration and representative. She's perhaps the only one out of my top list that didn't necessarily do it all in red and white. A lot of her achievements were on the England stage.
Yeah. Right, we're going to move on to the definitely not list. Now, this is no reflection on any player who we mention here, but it's just, you've got to whittle the list down, haven't we? So the ones that we all agreed upon were Gordon Armstrong, Johnny Crossan, Michael Gray, Ron Guthrie, Vic Hallam, Mickey Horswell, Seth Irwin, Dick Malone, Richie Pitt, Tommy Sorensen, Willie Watson, and David Young. We all ruled those out of discussion. And again, it's no slight on anybody. It's just, you've got to take some names out, haven't we, to figure out who's going to make the final 14. Anybody in there who, you know, from an objective point of view, you thought maybe was worthwhile further discussion, or were you both quite happy with decisions to chuck them on the scrap heap?
Yeah.
Andrew and Kelvin are both neither are too happy with it.
I'm as happy as can be.
Yes.
They've all got great stories. They've all done great things. And I mean, Gordon Armstrong, for example, still regularly goes to games. If I bumped into Gordon Armstrong, I'd be over the moon. I'd be well chuffed. So yeah, it's just the nature of this type of vote.
Yeah. So that leaves us with 23 names from which we have to pick 7. So those names are James Allen, Stan Anderson, Len Ashurst, John Owld, Kevin Ball, Gary Bennett, Ted Doig, Dave Halliday, George Hurley, Steph Houghton, Billy Hughes, Charlie Hurley, Johnny Mapson, Jamie Miller, Bob Murray, Kevin Phillips, Gary Rowell, Jill Scott, Len Shackleton, Jimmy Thorpe, Colin Todd, Dennis Stewart, and Dave Watson. Now, does anybody want to make a case for 1, 2, 3, 4 of those names being given higher priority than others? I think we've already talked about Kevin Phillips, and I think, Andrew, you make a really good point about him being the only English player to ever win the European Golden Shoe, I think it was. I think he's got to be worthy of discussion. I think Charlie Hurley, I think regardless of the old training ground being named after him, and this is the thing, right? Unless the club are going to do other things, like with Jimmy Thorpe, right? Then, you know, if this is it, what do we do? It's a hard conversation, and so I think Jimmy Thorpe's obviously worth further conversation. Len Shackleton, potentially. Jill Scott's certainly worth more conversation. Johnny Mapson, you know, if Monty's getting a statue, where does the goalkeeper who won league titles in the FA Cup go with us?
He's on. It's sorted, lads. I've already put him forward for my long service statue that's going to be created. I've just remembered as well, Charlie Hurley. The gates from the training ground are at the stadium, so perhaps he does have his recognition already.
That I meant to say that when I meant to jump in with that in terms of the accolades and the crowns that have been placed. He's literally got his gates, hasn't he? So,
so if we're excluding Bob Murray from this conversation, and one of the reasons for that is he's got his gates.
Yeah.
Are we excluding Charlie Hurley on this because he's got his gates as well?
Yeah. I would.
I don't like being so definite about don't use the word exclude. If we use a different word, I might agree to it.
Well,
he's got his crown. He's got his crowns. He's well represented. He's had his accolades.
He was nicknamed the King, so he's bound to have his crowns.
Yeah. He's entitled. I'm not arguing against those awards and accolades. I'm simply saying that because of the number of legends that we've got, we cannot keep putting them on that pedestal. The pedestals he's been on were thoroughly deserved, but there are other people who haven't had anything, and we need to acknowledge them. That's where I'm at with Charlie Hurley.
It's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because if you look at it in the context of other things that have been done and are being done and will be done, then this Legends Way becomes one part of something else. If you look at it as just a singular project, then you can't leave out Charlie Hurley.
Yeah. You see, in my head, I've got this patchwork quilt of acknowledgement that blesses the area around the club. That, I'm going to be walking down to Old Roker Park in the Blue House field, and that patchwork quilt's going to be all over the place by the time we've finished. By the time the club's finished. That's what I think.
When the stadium first opened, they named all of the concession areas after players, didn't they?
Yes.
They all, and I dare say when they were picking the names to be included on that will have caused a whole load of debate. So, it's a nice problem, but it's an age-old problem doing this type of project.
Now, my suggestion here would be that given that we're going to have the Bob Stokoe statue at one end of this and the Jimmy Montgomery statue at the other, and we've decided upon Bobby Kerr and Ian Porterfield as part of the 14, well, my question then is, do we take out of this list anybody else from 73? Because as an achievement, 73 and everything else that went around that promotion is kind of covered by those key people.
Which would see the likes of Davy Watson dropped from that list. Yeah,
in the list that we've got for people, so people who we haven't already put to one side, we've got Billy Hughes, Dennis Stewart, and Dave Watson from 73 still on the list.
That's not a bad suggestion. I mean, Bobby Kerr, one of the reasons why I think he deserves recognition is it's, as has been touched on before, it was more than just a cup final. He's one of our highest appearance makers. He twice battled back from broken legs to serve the club over virtually all of the 70s. Billy Hughes is a tricky one because Kelvin would probably say the same for Dave Watson. Billy Hughes was such an exciting fan favourite, and he hung around probably longer than most of the 73 team. So it is an argument. There is arguments for each individual, but I do like that we get a couple of nods towards 73 in Kerr and Porterfield, and that's that fairly represented.
And I guess the other thing with somebody like Dave Watson, we know that how much, Kelvin, you are a fan of Dave Watson. He did do an awful lot of other stuff at other clubs and international level after he left Sunderland.
He'd a fantastic career, and if these conversations that we have about him, believe me, Man City fans have the same conversations.
Yeah,
he's rated in the same way, but you could use that as an argument both ways.
Well,
the reason why they love him is the same reason why the people that saw him play. And I would argue that Dave Watson wasn't just about the 1973 FA Cup final put him on the world stage.
Yeah,
but he went on. He'd 14 England caps as a Sunderland player after 1973, and before he left the club to go and play top-tier football. He tried to get the club, he stayed with the club and tried for a couple of seasons to get to the top tier with the club. And that for me was the commitment. I guess if you want, I would say, yeah, I put him, I loved watching Dennis Stewart play, watched him as a youngster. But I felt after the 1973 FA Cup final, Dennis wanted away. He wanted away into the top tier. He decided, and that's his right. That's his right. Off he went. It didn't take him that long to get on his bike and get away to a first division, a top tier team. Davy Watson didn't do that. And even though he knew he was putting his cap, his potential England cap at risk. He stayed with the club, and that's for me one of the differences, if you want, between one of the 73 crew, which was brilliant, Stewart, and why I would keep Watson. I would argue a little bit more around David Watson as an entity, as a one of our all-time legends. And his appearance stats, he's got this remarkable, and I know I always talk about this with him, 5.5 seasons, he missed 11 games.
Yeah.
You look at his appearance stats, it's not as many as Bobby Kerr, but it's, when you're looking at the years that they played together, it's just about the same. As his, you've got two players there who are just there week in, week out, and performing week in, week out. They're playing on the pitch and generally performing well. Two standouts for the club. 1973 boosted them, gave them a massive leg up, but there was more to them than just that. It would be my argument with him.
Now, there's a few names on this list we're going to need to take out and whittle down. So we've got a short list to pick the final 7 from. James Allen is one that stands out to me here as well, because, for all intents and purposes, founder of the club, all that sort of stuff. He goes and forms Sunderland Albion a few years later, which obviously could have changed the whole course of the football club's history, really, couldn't it? Does he deserve acknowledgement here, especially if we're saying this is players? Because everybody else who we've got on the list so far is players. We've excluded Bob Murray from this conversation. No managers are listed. So he's the only person who would be on here for off-field things rather than on-field things.
Yeah. He did play in early games, though.
He did.
And if we're wanting to recognise the whole history of the club, I think he played in our first ever game. He was said to be one of our better players at the time. But yeah, you're right, in terms of league or FA Cup competition, I think he'd scarpered by then. Just when we were talking about the 73 team again, we keep going back to this other recognition business. They have all been given freedom of the city prior. So if any of us are feeling sore at having to leave our favourites out, we can console ourselves with that. James Allen, again, he's another one of mine who I think maybe deserves something individual or specific to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Yes.
a fair point. As a player, would he match some of these other names? Maybe,
No.
maybe not.
Right, so I'm going to make a decision to take James Allen off this shortlist. Others, I think we maybe take off. I'll throw some names at you. Stan Anderson, Len Ashurst, Kevin Ball. For all I love Bally, I think the company that we're talking about, Kevin Ball probably doesn't make the cut to the final 14. And Colin Todd, who I think is another one going to upset Kelvin. But again, somebody who left the club fairly early on in his career and did a lot of his great football stuff away from the club.
Yeah, he did. The difference, he drops into that Dennis Stewart category, doesn't he? The only thing I would say about him is, and of course I'm going to say this, and there'll be other people that come and say that wasn't right. You don't know that. I don't think he wanted to go. I think the club sold him. You know, I think he maybe had reached a point where Division 2 he recognised wasn't going to do his international career any good, and I think he knew he was built for better things, and he was. But I'm not sure he would have gone quite then if he'd had his own way, from my reading of the situation. But I'm not going to die on Todd's hill with you boys on this. He's a marvellous player. I will keep his memory alive every chance I get in the On This Week pods, boys. So, but I can surely see why we wouldn't include him in that list of definites.
Yeah. So, Andrew, Andrew, is anybody who I read out there in terms of James Allen, Stan Anderson, Kevin Ball, Len Ashurst, who you would argue vehemently to keep in the conversation?
Ooh, I could make an argument for everyone. You know when Kelvin nearly keeled over at the mention of Colin Todd not being in, I think Kevin Ball would be my version of that. You know,
Yeah.
Wembley appearances, captain of promotion teams, but I can begrudgingly see why he's not right for this.
So that leaves us with 14 now. So we've got 14 to get 7 from. That 14 is John Owls, Gary Bennett, Ted Doig, Dave Halliday, George Holly, Steph Houghton, Johnny Mapson, Jamie Miller, Kevin Phillips, Gary Rowell, Jill Scott, Len Shackleton, Jimmy Thorpe, and Dave Watson is still on that list. Give me your top 3 each from that list. Which 3, if you're going to pick 3 only, who would be your top 3? Now, again, we've got various different eras, various different rationale for selecting players. You've got the achievement of people like Kevin Phillips, who shot the club to promotion, got England caps whilst playing for Sunderland, got the European Golden Boot. Andrew talked earlier about Jamie Miller's achievements, 4 league titles with us. Johnny Mapson, of course, with league titles, FA Cup wins. Kelvin, you had George Holly in your definite list.
I was just looking at George Holly. Let me throw this at you. George Holly. 315 games, 154 goals, career that spanned 14 seasons, interrupted by World War I. He won the First Division title in 1913. He was in that team that almost did the double. Famously, almost did the double. They were beaten FA Cup finalists. He's 4th in our most goals scored for Sunderland list. He's 3rd in the most hat-tricks, and obviously he scored a hat-trick versus Newcastle in the 1908 game in that 9-1 defeat. He returned as a Sunderland coach. He did he's, if you're looking for evidence of further commitment to the team, he returns as a Sunderland coach. We know that he's a local lad. He was top scorer on 5 separate occasions, and he was the leading Division 1 scorer in 1911-1912. Charlie Buchan, who's on that list, he's wrote himself and admitted himself that he was at times in awe of George Hurley's skills and benefited enormously from assists from George Hurley. Local lad, the first see him, Mag Slayer, get him on that bloody list, boys. Come on.
I'm very happy to put George Hurley in there. Andrew, is there any objection from you to include George Hurley as our 8th pick?
There'd be no objection to any of the. That's the whole problem. Kelvin makes an excellent case for him, so yeah, I think that's a fair inclusion. That one.
Right, so we'll put George Hurley in. Jimmy Thorpe, do we want to take him out because he deserves more than this? Is that our rationale for taking him out of this?
I would say so. There's a fair few on this list who, for me, could justifiably be part of something else.
I'll tell you what it is, lads. If we take him out off that list, I'm going to put you both on the spot. We'll have to promise live on the pod that we will do something about his situation.
Well, I think as a collective, it's something we can all push, isn't it? We can come up with something to push the club and propose to the club that there is something more done for him, because his inclusion, and again, if you apply the rationale I use with Brian Clough, right? If he'd left the club, been transferred away from the club at that point, would we be talking about him as a potential person in this 14? Maybe not. No. Probably not. So it's the circumstances around his passing and what he sacrificed ultimately for the club that gets him on this list. Now, I think he deserves far more than a bit of a paving slab with his name on.
And I agree. And I guess Andrew's already made that point, that it's the sensitivity of it. I totally appreciate where Andrew's coming from with this, but that it requires something else. It's just, I'm very conscious that when we spoke about him, and I think we had some good feedback on that particular pod when we spoke about Jimmy Thorpe, that we can see why he would be on a potential list, but you can also see why it might, given the sensitivities, it might require something else. But it easily could be a case then of somebody told nobody to do something, and guess what? Nothing happened, So
look, I've again, in the end, this is for fun, right? We're not the committee who's deciding on the 14. So we can put Jimmy Thorpe. We can award Jimmy Thorpe a statue ourselves.
You never told me that when you invited us on this pod, you bugger.
I have to tell you all sorts of things to get you onto this pod, Kelvin.
Yeah.
Right. So we will reduce that. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got 12 people now to pick 6 from. So we've got John Howells, Gary Bennett, Ted Doig, Dave Halliday, Steph Houghton, Johnny Mapson, Jamie Miller, Kevin Phillips, Gary Rowell, Jill Scott, Len Shackleton, Dave Watson, Andrew. Who do you want to make a case for?
Oh, come on. All of them. I very quickly nominate Kelvin, the head of the Roper Report Committee, to do something for Jimmy Thorpe. I think, that would be something. That's something we could get behind. My only caveat would be assuming his family agree, because I remember his wife, his widow, did feel a bit sore about the club, and you don't know how over the generations that story has been received amongst the family. I just on John Old, I'm not necessarily saying he would be a pick for this list. Again, I think he deserves something else. But just for those that don't know him and are wondering, why is he a potential? He was the captain of the team of all talents. He was part of a championship winning side. He was also, though, he went on to serve Newcastle as a director, but financially was in a position where he paid for Johnny Campbell's funeral. And really importantly, in World War I, despite having left for Newcastle, acted as a financial guarantor for the whole existence of Sunderland AFC when finances were difficult during the conflict. So that is a man who maybe is relatively unknown, but the sheer existence of the club owes something to him. For my ones to go in this is maybe sentimental. I would make an argument, though, for Gary Rowell and Len Shackleton. Gary Rowell, when we did the pod remembering him after his passing a few months ago, it was clear just what a player he was. And Len Shackleton, just a world-famous footballer who played for Sunderland, loved Sunderland, and meant so much to a lot of fans, and from a purely selfish point of view, is a person who people in my family had a lot of love for.
All right. So in the interests of reaching a conclusion, I'm going to put Gary Rowell in, and I'm going to put Len Shackleton in as well. And then Kelvin, I'm going to give you 2 picks from the names that remain. So the names that we have got left are John Howell, Gary Bennett, Ted Doig, Dave Halliday, Steph Houghton, Johnny Mapson, Jamie Miller, Kevin Phillips, Jill Scott, and Dave Watson. 2 picks. Actually, I'll correct myself. 1 pick and Dave Watson.
Good.
Kelvin, shall I fill for a while whilst you work? Me and Martin could do a musical interlude whilst you work this one out.
Good.
I'm gonna plump for Jamie Miller.
Yeah.
Jamie Miller played for Sunderland in 2 different spells early on in our history. He played from August 1890 to May 1896, and then from May 1900 to 1904, 260 appearances, 127 goals. He did get 3 Scotland caps, but all after he left Sunderland. Football League Championship winner in 91, 92, 92, 93, 94, 95. And this is what makes him a bit unusual. 1901, 1902, he's got 4 on his CV, that lad. And there's only one other person has 4 on their CV. Do you know who that is?
He's on I've decided we're going to have a record appearance makers statue. He is 3rd in terms of appearances. He's behind Montgomery and Len Ashurst. Len Ashurst, again, long servant, most outfield appearances for the club. And then it's behind him, and the player you're talking about is Doig. Ted Doig.
Yeah. So for Doig and Jamie Miller, for me, it isn't just the longevity is one of them. The success that they were part of, unprecedented success. So if I've got that choice, I'm throwing Jamie Miller in there and saying that he deserves that. His partnership with Johnny Campbell in the early years, he was another lad who died tragically young as well. I think he was the Chelsea coach, wasn't he? When he
that's right.
When he died of it was TB that took him at a very early age. But that would be that if you were saying I've got one definite choice, I would throw him in there and say he deserves that.
Yeah, no,
he is a legend.
So I did give you 2 choices. I was being presumptuous, thinking that Dave Watson would be your other choice, but you can You can
No,
change that.
I can actually see why other people and why you two might argue that there are other players who deserve more, who deserve it more. Steph Houghton was I would have argued if one of our arguments was, should it be Steph Houghton or Jill Scott on that Legends walkway, I would have argued for Steph Houghton. And I've already said I love Jill Scott.
Well, that could be another argument that we have, because we'll have to cover that off shortly. So, Kelvin, do you want to pick a second, or do you want to keep that for after the break?
I'll keep it for after the break, thanks, lads.
Right, we will go for a very short break for a couple of ads. We'll give Kelvin some thinking time, and we'll be back soon.
Start your day with Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal. The instant oatmeal ready to help you tackle whatever your day brings. Like wrangling your toddler into their car seat. That was fun. Coaching your 6th graders soccer team. Go girls! And carrying all the groceries in one trip. Whew. Try Quaker Protein Instant Oatmeal, granola, and bars. Great taste and a good source of protein. Quaker, bring out the good.
Welcome back to How We're the podcast for our Legends debate. We are picking the 14 legends that should go on the legend walkway at the Stadium of Light. And we have got this far so far. We've got how many? We've got 11 selected so far. So we've got Charlie Buchan, Johnny Campbell, Rach Carter, Bobby Gurney, Bobby Kerr, Ian Porterfield, Niall Quinn, George Holly, Gary Rowell, Len Shackleton, and we have got Jamie Miller. So we've got 3 more spots up for grabs. And the people in contention for those 3 spots are John Owl, Gary Bennett, Ted Doig, Dave Halliday, Steph Houghton, Johnny Mapson, Kevin Phillips, Jill Scott, and Dave Watson. Now, Kelvin, before the break, you gave us Jamie Miller as one of your 2 picks.
Yep.
Who's your second pick going to be?
Dave Watson.
Dave Watson comes in at the back post to be Kelvin's second choice. That gives us 2 spots remaining. Now, if we go back to the point that Kelvin raised earlier, Jill Scott or Steph Houghton, those 2 names are still on our shortlist here. Do we feel we need to include one of those 2? Do we want to include one of those 2 or both of those 2? Andrew, how are you thinking about this?
How am I thinking about this? I'm losing my mind with all of these. Every time one of you 2 are talking, my brain pops up with something else. I mean, throughout this conversation, we've never even mentioned L.R. Rouse, who was a trailblazing goalkeeper and didn't make the list. So I think I need to get off this pod soon before I basically name every single Sunderland player ever. I think in some way, shape or form, the contribution of females to our club and to the game in general needs to be reflected. Jill Scott and Steph, I call her Steph Houghton. I can't pronounce it as Houghton, even though everybody else does, and that's perhaps even how the family pronounce it. They're both local lasses who love the club, which is another thing, I've always got a soft spot for local people or people who've grown up supporting Sunderland and then live out that dream of wearing red and white. So yeah, they need to be acknowledged. Maybe acknowledging them in a different way gives us more wiggle room for this 14 list. So maybe that's how we agree on that.
And this is where I got to with it, because if you look at it purely on a footballing basis, right? You go Steph Houghton, Jill Scott. I completely agree with everything you say. I love her when you see her on TV or you hear her on the podcast with Roy Keane and that lot. But from a footballing point of view, you can make as strong a case for her as Jordan Henderson.
Oh, yeah.
You know what
He's
I mean?
another man. Yeah.
So I think if we're deciding that we're leaving Jimmy Thorpe out because we're going to give him a statue, there is a case we could legitimately make that, and I 100% agree with everything you said, Andrew. The role of the lasses team, the Sunderland women's team from back in the day, the ladies team, female support, all of that stuff, I think should be acknowledged in a different format where it can actually be really good. Like, you look at how much time Mel Ray has spent leading the women's team. Like, that deserves acknowledgement. So for me, I think there's a really strong case. If we're not including managers in this, which we're evidently not, I think there's a real case for doing separate things for separate sections of the club. And that gives us a bit more wriggle room.
If Martin, if I agree to that, can we all agree to stop mentioning other names? Because you've just said Jordan Henderson, who I'd forgotten about. And straight away I've gone, well, there's Jordan Pickford as well, England's number one. So stop throwing all these.
He did it all with another club. It's not an issue.
Well, yeah,
I agree with it, but just stop giving me names because I can't deal with it.
Right, so we're gonna take out Jill Scott and Steph Houghton from this list on the proviso that they are given credit elsewhere, along with Steph Bannon. When you look at the number of games and how long she played, again, she's somebody who, from a purely footballing point of view, probably should be top of that list for
absolutely
that were in there.
Yeah.
So a couple of interesting ones there. So we've got John Howell, Gary Bennett, Ted Doig, Dave Halliday, Johnny Mapson, Kevin Phillips to pick two from. Now, John Howell, I think, Andrew, you very nicely sort of gave a summary of his contribution, which again was more than just on the field. The whole existence of the club might have been compromised if he hadn't stepped in to help, which to me deserves acknowledgement somehow. Whether that deserves acknowledgement on this Legends Walkway is another matter. And again, if we're handing out statues or some form of commemoration somewhere around the ground, because as we've talked about previously, there's so much scope to put things at various points around the ground celebrating the club's history. There's so much scope to do so.
How are supporters going to get into the stadium with all of these statues we're putting in their way?
And another one who would fall into that category could be Gary Bennett.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at him purely as a player, yes, he served Sunderland for a long time. He was captain for a long time. He was a good player. I think in his first season we got relegated. He spent time in the third division. Spent time, those first season got relegated. He had 2 seasons under McMenemy, got relegated. Third division season. So a lot of his time wasn't spent at the top of the footballing ladder with Sunderland, was it? But he did so much in terms of being a black player in the 80s, changing the narrative around racism and something, helping develop that conversation. He's done so much subsequently with Show Racism the Red Card. He's been awarded with honours with MBE or OBE he's got. And he's done so much work in that respect. And he's obviously been around the club for the past 20-odd years. An MBE, thank you, Andrew. And he's been around the club for the last 20-odd years as a co-commentator with Nick Barnes. So he's been a pivotal part of the club and football in Sunderland since he arrived all that time ago from Cardiff. If you were just judging it on his football on the field for Sunderland, maybe there's question marks, but not question marks in terms of ability, just in terms of being acknowledged in this way. So that's one. You maybe have an argument for having a statue or something more, because his contribution has been more than just a footballing contribution. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So you've got John Howell, Gary Bennett, Ted Doig. You've got Johnny Mapson there as well, Dave Halliday, and Kevin Phillips. I think, Andrew, you make a really good point about Phillips. And like you were talking about earlier with the Charlie Hurley Player of the Century vote, with that recency bias, I kind of wonder whether I do the reverse with Phillips, where because he is so recent, you can't actually judge him. And I saw him. So I saw pretty much every game Phillips played for us, as you two did. So it's hard to compare against the legend of people who you haven't seen and what you actually did see with your own eyes. Phillips's last season for me tainted slightly what he did with us to some extent. But if you look at his stats, the goal scoring, England caps, European golden shoe, there's an awful lot of argument to put him on that list, isn't there?
That suggestion of his final season tainting his legacy, I agree on that particular point with Phillips. But yeah, we lived through that. Maybe if we're reading about Kevin Phillips in 50 years' time, maybe that doesn't even get a mention. Some of these names we've talked about, there might be somebody screaming at their device now saying, yeah, but what about the 6 months where he was in dispute with the club, or what about the 6 months when he stank the place out? So yeah,
that terrible game that John Howell has.
Exactly. yeah. He was a disgrace. He wandered off he was meant to be defending the post, and he wandered off in that corner. We are dangerously close with Phillips to not including our post-war top goal scorer.
Yeah.
That just shows the levels we're on about. And he, for me, is one of the names in this little subcategory that I don't think maybe fits into one of my infamous list of we'll do something else for them. So yeah, nobody would walk that path, see Kevin Phillips' name on it and go, oh, well, what's that all about?
I'm going to make a call on this one, because I think in 30 years' time, people will think that we've been absolute idiots by not including Kevin Phillips on this walkway.
Yeah.
Because I don't think anybody else will have scored more goals for us than he has.
In 30 years' time. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you made that call, Martin, because I was thinking you two were idiots for not including him.
I still am an idiot, Kelvin, but just not for this. Not for this reason.
Doesn't change anything, Kelvin. Doesn't change anything. And to be fair, you did not have him on your definite list, Kelvin. Andrew had him on his definite list.
There was a bit of devilment there. I knew you two would be championing his cause. And I knew you'd have me on the rack about Davy Watson, so I didn't put him in there.
Right. So some footballer who's done amazing things for Sunderland could miss out because us three idiots have tried getting one over each other.
Right. I'm going to make another decision that John Howell and Gary Bennett are getting better recognition than a pavement slab. And that goes with Jimmy Thorpe and the Lasses as well. And Charlie Hurley, of course, already has his gate. So that leaves us with Ted Doig, Dave Halliday and Johnny Mapson for the final spot in our Legends walkway. What I will say with Ted Doig, now this might be just me, but I've read quite a number of newspaper reports of matches he played in at the time, and there's a lot of praise for his goalkeeping ability and saving shots. There's also a lot of mention of letting the ball trickle past and stuff like that. Now, granted, a completely different game back in those days when he played. I personally think you've got Monty, and look, again, Monty's in there for not just the 73 Cup final, as Kelvin's kind of talked about with a number of people. Johnny Mapson as a goalkeeper who's won the FA Cup, won the league with us, and played for so long. We've talked about games, and you can't quite believe the span of his career.
That he's still there. Yeah.
So out of those three names that we've got left, Johnny Mapson would get my vote. Dave Halliday, very close as well. But I think if you're going to pick one out of those three, Johnny Mapson would get my vote. How about you two?
You again, you argue it really well. Doig, like you say, there were suggestions in the papers of the Odrick, and also that brilliant idea that if his cap blew off, he was more bothered about chasing that down the pitch to cover his thinning hair than actually paying attention to the game, which is hilarious now, but at the time probably made him unpopular in certain sections. So yeah, rather than throwing his cap into the ring, maybe we would take his cap out of the ring and
we'll take Doig out.
It on his head.
Yeah. Now, Dave Halliday is the other one in this list, Kelvin, and his goal scoring ratio
Unbelievable.
Astronomical, isn't it?
Yeah, unbelievable. And how often on this week pod when he crops up, are we just listening to what the marker is and just going, bloody hell, that lad's I think each of us has said, I wish we'd seen him play. What was his secret? And what a fantastic period of a fantastic spell of goal scoring that he had for us, Dave Holiday. And he was another lad that went on and had a career away from us, but certainly with us, a cracking goal scorer. One question I've got about him: what did he win? What did we win whilst he was with us?
That's
Yeah, it's a very, very fair point. His goal scoring record, if you're purely looking at that in 4 years, 175 games, 165 goals.
I
think he still has the record, doesn't he, for the number of goals scored in the season for us?
And all in the top tier, because you could say that Clough's goal scoring record was close to that goal a game, kind of, just short of a goal a game. But Holiday was doing all of that in the top tier. Clough did that in the most of that was done in the second tier, wasn't it, for us with Clough? So I think it's a frustrating one, Holiday, because it's cracking goal scoring record that he's got. But what did we win? Whilst I just keep coming back to that.
It's a really fair argument.
The tie-in with Clough, who I think was his record, like a goal every 2 games. It was something impressive. I think the tie-in with Clough makes sense in that if you can't have one, you can't have the other. Holiday, what always amazes me, whenever Haaland in the current day beats a record, a top-flight record, and on Match of the Day they have the list of the other people, Holiday's always up there in terms of whatever Haaland does, Holiday's already done it. But yes, all of those goals, unfortunately for him, he wasn't necessarily in a team that did the business. Also, if we include Mapson, Sunderland have always had this reputation for having strong goalkeepers. So it's a little nod to that in that you've got Montgomery, you've got Mapson, our 2 cup-winning goalkeepers, and they're part of this union of strong stoppers over the years.
Dare I say, if we'd included Ned Doig, that would have put the cap on it. And Brian Clough, he was just short of a goal a game,
Was it a goal a game?
Holiday. Yeah.
He's got 1 million statues in Derby and Nottingham and Middlesbrough.
He's got one at
a
Borough
road
as
named
well,
after
hasn't
him.
he? Yeah.
And
nothing at Sunderland, though.
Well, there's not, and again, this obviously Cloughie wasn't even on the list that we were given to choose from, was he? But it was that point that was made. If he just disappeared and not had the managerial career he had after he left us, would we be talking about him being one of the 14 essentially best or most deserved players to be recognised in 2026? And probably not. So we have got our 14. So our 14 is Charlie Buchan. There are some caveats to this 14, of course. So Charlie Buchan, Johnny Campbell, Rach Carter, Bobby Gurney, Bobby Kerr, Ian Porterfield, Niall Quinn. So they were the 7 that we had locked in at the start, that we all agreed upon. George Holly, Gary Rowell, Len Shackleton, Dave Watson, Jamie Miller, Kevin Phillips, and Johnny Mapson are the 7 that we have selected out of that big long list that we had to choose from. Now, I did say there's some caveats. So the caveats to this selection is Jimmy Thorpe gets a statue, John Owls gets a statue or some other commemoration, Gary Bennett gets a statue or some other commemoration, and the lasses get their own Legends Walkway or something similar to recognise the contribution of the female players of Sunderland Association Football Club. So with those provisos in place, chaps, are we happy with that list?
No.
Start again.
Quick question, quick answers, lads. Len Shackleton, Why is he on the list?
Len Shackleton, for me, when you read stories about that era of Sunderland, he was the name that was linked with anything good or everything good that happened at the club. Obviously, we didn't win much going to your criteria. He wasn't part of a winning team in terms of honours, but he stayed at the club for an awful long time. He played a hell of a lot of games for us, was a real shining light in terms of football on the field. And for me, as well as a kid growing up, going to Sunderland in the mid to late 80s, 90s, he was still part of the club then. He was, I remember at the Stadium Light, he was turning up with Peter Reid to open the visitor centre, I think, at the Stadium Light and stuff like that. So he's around the club as well. And the fact he hated Newcastle, for me, comes into us as well.
Again, there's another statue of players who've stuffed it to the mags at some point. Yeah, it's a fair question, Kelvin, but as Martin says, he was an icon, a part of the Bank of England club, which is an era we talk a lot about. And am I right in thinking he was a golfing buddy of Bob Stokoe? Was it when he became a journalist, he was involved in the appointment of one of Sunderland's managers, and I think it might have been Stokoe. So that in itself is a pretty big achievement,
It certainly is.
Well, I see where you're coming from.
No, he's one of our great entertainers, isn't he? And that's the crown that's often placed on his head, isn't it? That he was one of the great entertainers of the game of an era. Because that Bank of England era, it does not cover the club is not covered in glory from that Bank of England era.
No.
And it finishes terribly. But throughout that, we've got there's a couple of players that rise above the morass, and Shaq to me seems to be one of them. Yeah, good stuff.
I think with his inclusion, we've got a very nice sort of spread of different eras as well, haven't we? Throughout that 14 of them.
Yeah.
So there you go. And of course, this is just our opinion. It's nothing official. It's not going to decide anything. But see how hard it is for us to choose. I bet the club are glad to put out the votes. So they just count the votes and see who came out on top. There is a field where you can submit your own players as well. So I presume people like Steve Hetzke will get a few votes.
Hetzke's got his brick. You'll find it at the bottom of the weir, right beside Danny Dickey-Ewis.
So there we go. We have completed our Legends Walkway. So thank you very much, Andrew.
I loved that and hated that in equal measure. But yeah, thank you. Thank you. Nice to be part of it.
And thank you, as always, Kelvin.
Yeah. What's in England? What's in England?
Yeah, and again, we've just spent a good couple of £1 million on statues for Sunderland as well. So David Bruce can send us an email of thanks for that. We will be back tomorrow as we build up to the Spurs game at the weekend. But until then, it is goodbye from us.